Welcome to the Pit. Let's go save some lives.
Obviously, firstly, congratulations on the show, and
Thank you.
it's probably the biggest surprise of the year, I think, for most people, anyways. And it's probably the first time in a long time I've seen word of mouth play a big part in giving the show attention. And of course, your performance and your role plays a big part in that. And so, to start off, I wanted to know, could you talk me through the process of your audition and how the character was initially described to you?
Yeah, my audition was sent to me at the end of May of 2024, and I basically heard that Garcia was a badass who is slightly arrogant, but knows what she's talking about, knows how to get the job done. And basically, I put myself on tape. I went to New York to visit my grandfather, who's 102, and I visit often. Yeah, he's a gift of a human being. And while we were out to sushi one day, because he loves sushi, my manager called me saying, "Hey, when you get back, the day after you get back, you have a callback for the show, The Pit." And I said, "Cool, great." And I came back to a Zoom call with John Wells, and I'm sure Scott was also on the call along with casting, Scott Gemmel, showrunner. And basically, it was just a lovely time to work on the scene once with John, who directed the first episode, obviously. And we did it once. I had fun. He was pleased. I think he gave me a note just to see if I could take a note and have fun with it. And I did. And then we moved on to the second scene. And he was also really pleased. And at the end was just like, great, cool. And everyone, you could just get the sense that people were pleased. they had seen what they wanted to see, and I did what I wanted to do with it. And in the end, an hour after that Zoom call, I found out that I was the creative favorite. So the creative team's favorite. And then I had to wait 2 days to get, official approval from the entire, network and studio. And I got the job then.
Oh wow! I mean, you did an amazing job. So they were right in choosing you as a favorite. And I briefly looked at your IMDb profile. You mentioned that you graduated in Brown University in human biology, and now you're playing a doctor in a show. So did that help inform your preparation by any chance? And why I guess, transition from a science education into the arts?
Good question. It absolutely helped inform my performance and my understanding of the ED, but also the medical world at large. I was in the 8-year medical program at Brown. They have a program called the Program for Liberal Medical Education, PLEME for short. You apply as a high schooler under the assumption that you want to be a doctor. I did not necessarily want to be a doctor. I was good at the sciences and math and had always excelled in school. My mother is a single mother from Panama. As an immigrant, she wanted her daughters to excel and succeed. And so we had the option of lawyer, doctor, or actuarian. So the eldest sister is a lawyer. The middle sister is a doctor who also went through Brown's Program for Liberal Medical Education. And I was thinking about becoming an actuarian, but I was like, hey, I'll apply to Brown's program. My sister was there at the time. I got in. And then while at Brown, I was exposed to liberal education, a wide swath of courses that I was able to take, because the program allows you to kind of work outside of the sciences and outside of your medical track in order to be a more well-rounded person. And that opened the door to my understanding of the other things I could study, and acting and the arts was a big thing that I really wasn't exposed to previously at that point. So I found my heart was expanding in ways that I had never felt. I was learning at a rate I had never felt. And that's when I kind of made the shift into acting and had this intuition for this craft, but also knowing that it would always teach me something throughout each character that I got to play, every story I got to inhabit. And I've always loved learning. I've always been voracious for just education of all kind, any and all kinds. So it kind of blends together all of my interests.
Makes sense. And it's funny enough, I actually studied in biomedical science, so
Oh, cool.
I have that kind of scientific background. But then I halfway through the course, I switched to film studies, and,
Oh,
so now I'm doing journalism, and I'm slowly taking into full-time acting, hopefully within the next
yeah.
year.
Oh,
So that's
wonderful.
kind of so that's kind of why it's nice seeing that other people who have that kind of STEM background who just transition into the arts. Because
Absolutely.
it's like, especially when we're of immigrant backgrounds, we have that innate pressure where obviously family wants you to either be the lawyer or the doctor, and like there's no money anywhere to be found as a filmmaker. But we have
Exactly.
to do what we love. And
Exactly.
so,
And the arts are
so
so
I want
important.
exactly. And it's the only way I feel like you can creatively understand yourself better, at least from my perspective. So to talk a bit about your character, Dr. Garcia, from my perspective, as we watched the show, she's quite confident, level-headed, clearly knows what she's doing, and she's eager to take on new students and bring them up to speed, as we see with Dr. Santos. So I wanted to ask, when you took on that character, was it the exact same as it was initially described, or did it take on a different journey as you started trying to figure out and reading the table reads?
It was pretty much consistent with the original read and what I had garnered from the script.
Mm.
Certainly things expanded as storylines began, added to the
Mm.
fabric of the story that we're telling. But I think I think it pretty much was on track with what I had read when I first got the script. And, in terms of it's a teaching hospital, certainly there's this friction of wanting to get things done efficiently, but also we have these young students and young student doctors there to teach. So there's friction that occurs, but it's still in the same vein of the confidence and the competence.
Did you instantly click with your character, or was there like
Oh,
a moment somewhere that everything fell into place for you as you navigated your character?
yeah, I feel like I instantly clicked. As you can tell, I'm a really smiley person, but it's fun to step into someone who is just uh, there's no time for smiling on this job.
Yeah.
Certainly I think you see glimpses of Garcia who might have a drink after work or go out with
Mm.
coworkers and kind of let loose a little bit and release some of the pressures of the job. But there's something so gratifying about stepping into the seriousness and the setting, the stakes that we're experiencing in this job setting that I loved it. And I also, because I was part of the PLEMI program at Brown, I know so many doctors. I
Mm.
was, you know, classmates with them and remained friends with. And I have a sense for they're different outside of work as my friends, but when I
Mm.
hear the stories that they tell about what it is in the workspace,
Mm.
they kind of turn into this, they lock into something else that is really powerful and inspiring. And I love hearing about that stuff. So I definitely borrowed from some doctor personalities. I also
Mm.
borrowed from some unsavory personalities that I know who, while I may not always agree with them, I
Mm.
can respect the approach to things and the resolute focus that they need in order to
Mm.
accomplish the tasks at hand.
Makes sense. And as you know, as a medical drama, it's surprisingly quite anti-drama, if that makes sense, at least in a traditional perspective. And
Sure.
we don't really get to see anything outside the hospital, as in we don't know the personal lives or the backstories, and we're just stuck to the workplace. So as
Mhm.
an actor trying to go through the paces with your character, was that a challenging approach to understanding where your character goes, or did it help simplify your approach to, I guess, living out?
That's a really good question. I think that the onus is on the artist to fill in the backstory and to create the layers.
Mm,
And in a way, while trying to figure that out, I realized what I'm bringing as Alexandra is gonna come through as well. So my own lived in
mm,
life, even if, I'm not
mm,
actively thinking, oh, this thing that I'm living in my life, I'm gonna infuse into the character. It's
mm,
still gonna breathe through me. So
mm,
there's the inherent life that's being lived. There's the story on top of it, the medical stuff, but then yeah, the little relationships that start to pop in between Santos or between Langdon and Robbie, of course. That I love that it's not all spelled out, and
mm.
it's that much more accurate and realistic because of that. But yeah, I think that there's little things that I infuse for myself, and in terms of surgery too, it takes a really specific kind of person to be a
Mhm.
surgeon, and to again turn on and turn off when you need to,
Mm.
to really focus all your energy into this one thing when you're at work. So I I think that I had a really good time, yeah, creating that heart that walks through the space and also blending it with my own person.
Makes sense. And you've worked on shows before, so like there's most notably Grey's Anatomy,
Mhm.
and with the Pitt being another medical drama, did that prior experience make it easier to participate, or and how did they differ to you?
Oh, they're very different in tone, but also I played a patient in Grey's Anatomy.
Mm.
And I also spoke Spanish the entire episode, which was a first
Mm.
for me. I am bilingual.
Mm.
As I mentioned, my mom's from Panama, but my Spanish is not something that I get to use as often as I'd like. And so it was quite a challenge to step into playing an Argentinian woman, which is also a
Mm.
totally different accent. It's very European and Italian
Yeah.
sounding, compared to Panamanian or Dominican Spanish, which is, I'm from New York, is a place that's like there's a lot of Latinos who are Dominican or
Mm.
Puerto Rican, and so my Spanish is really kind of amalgamations of those accents and dialects. And the Argentinian one was one that I had to work on, and we had a dialect coach, luckily for Grays. So, also, not to spoil if you haven't seen the episode, but I'm going to spoil it. My character, she's a visitor, she's a tourist in the country, doesn't speak any English, and her son gets into fentanyl.
Mm.
And that's a really scary thing because her son's only about 8 years old or so. So
Yeah.
she doesn't know what's happening, and he could die. But when they figure out that it's fentanyl, they accuse her of neglect,
Mm.
essentially. And then in the end, you realize that she didn't have fentanyl. It was the
Mm.
Airbnb that they rented that had someone had left their drugs behind in one
Mm.
of the bedside tables. So she gets arrested in the episode. So there's a lot that happens, and I think that in terms of comparing to the Pit, I mean it's a storyline that you could possibly see on the Pit, but I got to
Yeah.
play it from the other side of the tracks.
Makes sense. So, as a doctor, having the patient perspective, does that make a difference in terms of trying to, because I believe humans in general were like empathy machines, and
Mm.
going through the treatment on the other side and knowing that can make it easier to, I guess, offer treatment yourself. But I don't know how you see
Sure.
it.
Except that surgeons, I think, per my understanding, are very different in the sense
Mm.
that they don't really like to hear their patients speaking too much. They like doing surgery. They like when their patients
Yeah.
are under, so they can do what they're really good at: cut someone
Mm.
open, fix the problem, be done, move on to the
Makes
next
sense.
surgery, which they always look forward to. And if I were to be a character more, on the same page as Dr. Mohan, for instance, you could see, or even Dr. King, the empathy of having been a patient as a human being and also played a patient as an actor would
Mm.
really feed into playing those characters. But
Mm.
as a surgeon, it's a different story. They're different breeds of people.
Makes sense. And unless I missed you on screen, is there any particular reason why you don't appear for the last three episodes?
Oh, good question. Garcia's doing surgery. Again, she's doing what she
Okay,
loves
yeah, makes
and
sense.
she's where she needs to be.
Mm,
You get Dr. Walsh is handling the making sure, the
mm,
patients are getting what they need and before they go up to surgery. And surgery is overloaded, as you hear throughout those episodes.
yeah.
There's 25 beds, and we're constantly trying to get through these cases in order to make room for new ones. And there's so many GSWs, there's so many gunshot wounds downstairs amongst the MCIs that come in that, yeah, Garcia's up there doing surgery.
Mm. And so I would say two key relationships in the show is between Garcia and Santos and Langdon. So I wanted
Mm.
to know, because I feel like there's a inherent chemistry that's built between the three of yous, and from Langdon's perspective, there's obviously more time and history there. I imagine from continued teamwork and just time in general. How did you manage to give it that kind of weight and history there when we don't really get any of that? We're just thrown in, but we believe it anyways.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you did. I mean, honestly, Patrick Ball is just an incredible human being, and it was really easy
Mm,
to relate to him immediately. He's like, I mean, I think part because we got to work together so much, but also just upon meeting him, he was just such a
mm,
lovely spirit to spend time with, and he's just really fun and makes wonderful jokes, and he's also such
mm,
a really present person that it was really quite easy to create that history and that kind of
mm,
sibling rivalry.
mm,
He does these little things on set. For instance, would be doing a rehearsal of a scene right before we're about to do a scene, and that entails just saying the lines out loud. And if there's specific blocking, just making sure we know where we're standing and walking. And he'd be like, "Okay, we're about to shoot the scene," and he'd say, "This time with expressions." And you just think like, wow, we're about to go into this really serious surgical,
mm,
trying to save a life, and infuses the
mm,
room with a little humor
mm,
right before doing this thing, and
mm,
it's just lovely. So he made that quite easy to create that history with. And Santos, we're meeting for the first day,
mm,
and so that is pretty easy to step into. And Issa is also equally lovely, and
mm,
um, you know, our relationship as actors is different than the relationship as characters, but the desire to have conversation as actors and kind of understanding of scenes, it bleeds into the relationship of wanting to have those conversations as the characters, as Garcia and Santos, and wanting to have understanding and these dialogues that happen. There's a similarity in those two things, even though they're different relationships.
And as in your friendship work with Santos, it feels like your character kind of sees herself in Santos in a way.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we have no idea what Garcia's first day was like, but do you have any idea, or you could presume what her first day was like? Would it be quite different, or I don't know, like there's a lot of confidence and clearly
Yeah.
professionalism there, so it must have come from somewhere.
Yeah. I think to your point, she sees a lot of Santos in her, and that the gutsiness, the bravado that you need for surgery, she recognizes
Mm.
in Santos. Bravado in the sense that like you got to have that.
Yeah.
That's that bravado can be interpreted differently. I think it can be kind of
Mm.
false, but I think for
Yeah.
surgery, like you need to have this is what needs to happen, and
Yeah.
there's no vacillation. And so, if in terms of Garcia's first day, I think it probably was super similar. And
Mm.
um, I can imagine Garcia being a little bit more of a listener, of a
Mm.
deep, wanting to absorb things, and not just making calls on her own in order to prove a point. I think Garcia is a little bit more calculated, but certainly there is a lot of similarity.
And I would say with your collaboration extending to Noah as well, I would say because he's kind of like the spearheading the show, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing how it was like working with
Oh
him,
my
especially
God.
when he's got that experience with ER as well and now the Pit?
Yeah. He is the mentor of all mentors. I mean, as the number one on a show, you would hope for someone who sets a tone for the entire set that is welcoming and collaborative, and he does that and more. He's obviously got a lot on his plate as the actor, with all of the scenes that he's in and all of the
Mm.
dialogue that he's handling. And so in his downtime when we would all share the same waiting room as actors. Actually, it's the patient waiting room is what we also use as the actor waiting room.
Mm.
And when the patient waiting room is not being used for filming. And sometimes he would sit there and he would have his headphones in and he'd be in actor mode of like focusing on whatever the scene was next. But sometimes he'd be really engaging, and actually most times he'd be there joking around or having a serious conversation about craft or life or politics or whatever. I mean, he's
Mm.
just such a lovely, present human being, and he loves what he does, and it's infectious. And he's so down for questions, and I would kind of, I didn't want to bombard him with questions, but I did notice one person asked him one time about something, and I realized, oh, the door is open. We can approach him with certain things. So I asked him a few questions when I could, and for clarification, but also for just like how he as an actor has maintained the ability to handle this kind of role. Have given his experience on ER, of course, but that was years ago. At this point, this was 15 years ago, and so he's jumping back into the saddle, and he, in some ways, is vulnerable because he has this reputation that precedes him. So he needs to meet the moment, and he certainly does that with flying colors. But he's a human being, and you're watching him as an actor on set. I'm watching him go through this journey of his own, and I'm constantly learning with the grace that he walks that path. And I couldn't I could keep going on and on. I was so in awe of him and so grateful for his mentorship and the example that he sets.
Were there any particular advice or meaningful remark that really stuck with you and you'll
Okay,
be willing
yeah.
to share?
Yeah, sure. So there's some scenes where he is just speaking for pages.
Mm.
Whether it's the MCI, he's giving the protocol for what needs to happen, who's going where, and what doctors will be in what section, what colors, wristband, all that stuff. I'm like, how? How are you memorizing that with such ease? And then how are you approaching this? What's your process? And essentially, because also you have to keep in mind, it's not like he's had weeks to memorize that. He hasn't had that script for weeks. We each get the script, a few days before we're about to shoot, usually. It's a 9-day schedule per episode. And he is immersed in whatever episode we're shooting. So there's not a lot of time in between. And he said quite simply, I sit down and I memorize beyond what you would think you need. You just keep repeating it. And he does it with his wife, apparently. I would do it with my husband, but I don't want to exhaust my husband. But you find someone who is willing. Luckily, Sarah Wiley, also an actress, is like with him in this endeavor, like helping him to memorize. And so I realized, okay, I have to just find someone, whether I pay someone or a friend, who can do this for an hour. Do the scene for an hour if you need to. And you're doing it with, nothing on it. You're not acting. You're just neutrally repeating the words so that it is fully ingrained in you. And that seemed so simple, in terms of resource, an approach to a very, how shall I say, it's just kind of like a robotic thing, right? It's not the acting side of things. It's just the thing that you need to do in order to then get to set and act. And to that point, Catherine Lanasa, who plays Nurse Dana, I asked her too, like, what are you doing? Because also, are you taking vitamins? What is helping your brain to function at the most optimal level? And she had the same answer. She said the same exact thing. You repeat beyond what you think you would ever need. And she hires someone for that. And so I tapped into that resource and used the person she hired for one of the scenes where I just wanted to see what it was like to work in that way. And I loved it. I can't wait to continue working that way.
And do you think we can expect Garcia in season 2, or is that something you can't confirm yet?
I actually don't know if I'm allowed to say, but
Oh, I see. So it's
I'm
up in the air, I
smiling.
guess. So I
Say what
guess
you will.
so as it's the surprise show of the year, I would say, and I think the weekly model has really helped bring that conversation into the spotlight. Um, with the show also taking the old cable route of annual releases for every season, is that something that you're really looking forward to in terms of as an artist, where you can constantly be in that headspace, or do you prefer having that long interval between seasons?
Oh my God. No, this is a blessing. This is what it used to be like. And
Mm,
it allows us as actors to, not spend too much time away from our characters and the
mm,
environments that we get to tell these stories in. It's also such a blessing as an actor, especially in this time where the industry is in
mm,
a really weird place. And to be able to work here in Los Angeles where I live, to make the commute, I mean, it makes this journey feel like it's a little bit more solidified, even though,
mm.
we never know. Arts are the arts,
Yeah.
it's a roller coaster ride. But it really allows me personally to settle into the work, and it's a dream come true to be able to tell the story for longer than one episode, let alone just a few.
Mm. And I have two quick fun questions. So if you could choose three other characters to pair up with to handle a night shift, who would you pick? And the
Of the day
same
shift?
question, night shift instead. In case you moved to the night shift, who would you pick from the three characters? And the same question, but three of your classmates.
Okay. I would say from the veterans, I mean, I know Robbie's had a long day, but I'm gonna want Robbie there. Oh man, I can't choose three. I'm already in my mind going over three. Yeah, uh, Ellis is
Mm,
phenomenal. I feel real secure having her presence in a room and handling business. And from the baby doctors, I'd say, man, I think I'd say, ooh. I was gonna say Whitaker. I think I'd say Whitaker, but I also am now like, oh, McKay. They've all got such great qualities and could do some great things in any shift.
mm. And what about actors, like classmates in general?
Oh, you can't make me choose. That's too hard. Um, Gosh, I mean, in terms of being around people, Shabana, who plays Javati, is an
Mm,
absolute delight. She's so funny and just a little firecracker. Um, let's see, Nurse Dana, Catherine
mm,
Lanasa, also just like whip smart, funny, quirky, cool to observe in a work setting too and learn from. And then, God, sorry to all those I couldn't choose. I would have chosen everyone I could have. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say, Mateo, Nurse Mateo. It's not a
mm,
doctor. I'm gonna include one of the nurses. Just like such a sweet young man who is so wise beyond his years, and it just creates this really lovely environment on set to work around.
mm. And at the end of the show, we see Santos, spoilers, offer to be roommates with Whitaker. And so, if there's two or three characters in the show you think would be an ideal roommate for Garcia, who would you think? And
A
then,
roommate?
yeah, ideal roommate for Garcia, who do you think would be? And then two characters who you think would be the worst roommates for Garcia.
Oh my God. Okay. Um, Best roommates, I'm gonna say, honestly, I'm gonna say Dr. Robbie. I think that like we just get along so well, and it's just like we understand each other. We understand like
Mm.
if we disagree, there's still an understanding of like, okay, I see where you're coming from. And uh maybe Langdon, because again, there's
Mm.
that sibling rivalry, but it's all good fun.
Mm.
Lastly, good roommate for Garcia, I think McKay. I think McKay's got a cool past, and she is someone who I really respect that character. Garcia really would respect her. She comes to the job later in life after having a tumultuous past, and I think they'd have a good understanding in a lived in environment. Worse, I'm going to say Santos because there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of tension, and even though it's friendly a lot of the time, you don't know where its head is. So I
Yeah.
like my home environment to be one of peace. I don't want any
Mm.
unknowns, so I'm going to put Santos in that category. I'm going to say I'm gonna say, even though I love them and actually individually they'd be great roommates, I'm gonna say Nurse Perla and Princess, because if I had both of them
Oh.
as roommates, they would be talking shit about me. And I wouldn't understand because I don't speak
Mm.
Tagalog. The last one was Mohan.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
because
Really?
I think she's a loner. I think she needs to live alone.
Oh,
I
okay.
think I think in terms of roommates, like she seems like a lovely person outside
Mm.
of the job though. I think she is very insulated
Now, ready for the pizza.
and she needs that in order to recoup
Mm.
from the day.
What the hell
So
are you
I don't
doing?
want to be in
Pneumo
her
is
space.
tiny. It'll resolve spontaneously.
Yeah, it was tiny until the patient went on BiPAP.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Guide wire out.
His sats were down. I gave the order.
Without clearing it with
Fans
me.
want to know your opinion on
Honest mistake from the
Langdon
rookie.
yelling at Santos.
That's how we learn.
Oh my God. I think it was wildly inappropriate.
She knew everything. Should be
I think
your
there's a different
attending,
way
not an
to do
intern.
that. I mean, in terms of Alexandra, I am a fan of efficient communication,
Mm.
and efficient in the sense that it can be done in a nicer way, if it can be done in a classier way, if it can be done in a clearer way that's actually going to lead to education. If there's a lesson to be made, it probably would be done better with honey than whatever the saying is, acid, vinegar,
Yeah.
whatever. You want something to go down with honey, not to sugarcoat things, but if the whole point is to allow for this teaching hospital to turn out great
Mm.
doctors in order for patients to have the best care, then we need to find better ways to communicate. And so I think he
Yeah.
could have done.
I mean, I do also think that whispering is better than shouting. So there's that.
Yeah. You can
And
accomplish a lot in a whisper, and it can still
exactly.
put you on edge and make
Mm.
someone feel like, okay, I'm in trouble and I need to really
Be more
take
alert.
it
Yeah.
apart, you know.
And so what is Garcia's first impression of Santos, and how did you and Issa arrive at their dynamic, and what do you hope to see for them later on?
First impression is she's really smart and
Mm.
brave, and has some really great ideas in terms of patient care, even though some of them are unconventional, or she at least, makes a big effort to be a presence and a formidable presence in the space. I'm interested to see what this incredible writing team is gonna how they're gonna pick up the page once we turn into season 2. I mean, in terms of what I would hope for, I think that we can't ignore the fact that we had this connection on day one, and also it turned into a mass casualty event
Yeah.
that I think a lot of those things will probably be forgiven. And also, who knows how we each change from that event. I have some ideas personally that I've been kind of mulling about in my own head and heart. But yeah, I think it's going to make people a little bit more, perhaps less petty when it comes to the human interaction, the human relations between employees, and more focused on the patient. And of course, sometimes doctors disagree on how to help a patient. So the differences in opinion can kind of look like ego, and the clashing of egos. But perhaps we've all come out of this incident with a better way of communicating with one another and helping those who need help.
A dedicated portion of the fan base, they see or interpret Garcia as queer. What is your interpretation of Garcia, I guess, in that perspective? And especially if there's any attraction towards Santos.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that it's something that people are curious about or certain about one way or another. I have my feelings and my theories, and I think it was pretty clear. I mean, in terms of asking someone's sign in the middle of dealing with a patient, you could be asking in terms of like, will you work well in the surgery in the OR upstairs with us? Will we be compatible? But yeah, I think Garcia is definitely queer and probably bisexual.
That's probably the biggest victory for the fan base, having your confirmation or vouch. But you know, so what's your opinion on this mini ER-OR rivalry, if there is any, where you see Garcia and Walsh seem to have a playful beef with the emergency department? And did you come up with any kind of backstory or, I guess, history for that, or to add to the performance, or was it just how it flowed?
Yeah, I think it's just how it flowed, and in talking to the medical consultants on set, we have so many people who work in these spaces in real life who have told us this is what it's like. This is how surgeons are. This is what they want. This is how they interact. It's a trope, but it's a trope for a reason. So there wasn't much talking about it beyond what's on the page and knowing that that's true.
Okay, and I'm curious on your interpretation of the line "You're trouble" when you say that to Santos. And obviously, I'd say Garcia doesn't want any part in that kind of drama or controversy, and especially when someone who just came onto the scene is already arousing suspicion on one of your trusted workers. Does that bring any kind of concerns about yourself and your own security, or could you talk me through that, I guess?
Yeah, I think that definitely puts Garcia on edge and makes her less trustworthy of this person who she's become quite fond of in the 12 hours that they've spent together. And yeah, I think that knowing that there are a lot of doctors in real life who struggle with substance abuse, whether Garcia knows that Langdon was taking substances from the hospital or not, it is a really, really tricky, big accusation. And I think that it gives Garcia pause that these relationships could be in jeopardy, both the older relationship with Langdon and the possibility of, him getting in trouble and losing his expertise in the hospital when Garcia hasn't observed any kind of need to call attention to, his lack of efficiency or his ability to give care. None of that has ever arisen. So for it to arise now when it's never been an issue from anyone else, no one has, there's never been talk of this from any any nurse or any other doctor. So for a brand spanking new doctor to come in with this bravado and this brash approach, it feels like a bull in a china shop, and it's worrisome.
And lastly, was the attraction to Santos purposeful, at least from a writing or chemistry perspective, or is that something that was kind of figured out along the way as the show develops?
Good question. Actually, the scene in which Garcia comes in and she stops Langdon from giving the rundown on this patient and says, I want to hear from Santos. That was one of my audition scenes. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so that was my second audition scene. And when I say excellent presentation, and I go on after that scene, you know, you see that patient go, oh, you made quite the impression on her. And Santos is like, I've only known her for a few hours. And he's like, well, you must have done something right, or whatever he says. Yeah, that preceding scene was my audition, and you know, had the feel of I think I'm just realizing, actually, I think in my breakdown of my character, it does say that Garcia is queer. So there's no question. There's absolutely no question. So that when I had the callback and John Wells saw that scene and I had my fun with it and, you know, flirting, the only thing he said was, that was great. Let's do it again. Just flirt some more. Turn up the flirting. And I said, gladly. So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. The answer is yes.
Makes sense. And I know you can't say anything at the moment, but just a personal preference for yourself. Is there anything in particular or specific you would love to explore further for your character if she does return in season 2?
Oh my God, there's so much. There's so much to explore, and I don't know that I could tell you one thing in particular. My trust is fully in the writing team and also all the medical consultants. You know, Dr. Joe, who is the head medical consultant, executive producer, and also was the consultant on all 15 seasons of ER. He's got such a wealth of information and storylines that he's lived through as the head ER at Cedars-Sinai at one point. And I am just so excited to hear more of these stories and get to play in them.
That's kind of all from me. Thanks so much for your time, and
Thank you, Zach.